All right, everyone. Last video, I talked about the differences between leaders and leadership and managers and management. And in this video, I'm going to talk more about the term drivership that I used in my first series. And I used it in the context of confusing someone who drives for success with a leader and how business has replaced leaders in leadership with drivers in drivership. So here's what I mean by this. You have to start with how I defined leadership in an earlier video. Remember me asking if the loudest person in the room or the person giving the take the mountain speech or the class A personality were really leaders. And I said from my experience, these people could be a leader, but they usually aren't. And why aren't they? And a lot of that comes from the classic mistake many companies make when it comes to promoting a former individual contributor to a position of leadership over others. And sales is an easy example we can use. I mean, how many times have you seen a company promote their best salesperson into a sales manager or a sales leader role, right? It happens all the time. I mean, it happens all the time. And then what happens when they do that? Well, usually it doesn't work near to the degree of success the company expected. And it's funny because everybody knows this, and yet companies still do it. They do it to this very day. So, why doesn't this work? And how does this tie back to the topic of confusing leadership with drivership? So, not always, but many times, those who are driven for individual performance are driven for their own personal reasons, right? It could be money, it could be recognition, it could be advancement, it could simply just be ego. And they're drivers and they drive themselves to perform, and they're really good at it. What happens when you put this driver into a leadership role is they try to instill their personal motivation into others. The problem is that these other people on the team may or may not have the same personal motivation as our driver. It could be motivated by completely different things. So then what happens? Well, our driver begins to push everyone else as they push themselves. And since our drivers are many times individual performers, driven by money, recognition, advancement, ego, it doesn't usually work in a team environment. And our driver doesn't care because they're too busy driving themselves and the team to even start thinking about actually leading a team. So, what happens next, since our driver only thinks on their terms, usually money, recognition, advancement, ego, they believe the only way to get others to do what they want is to offer them a carrot to motivate or manipulate them. And what do you think that carrot's going to be? Right? Money, recognition, advancement, maybe play on their ego, right? Because that's what drives the driver, and that's what the driver wants. So, if you get back to my core concepts of leadership, three. First one, making a positive emotional connection. Second one, inspiring others to be better tomorrow than they are today. And the third one, the leader cares more about the team's goals than their own goals. Well, where does this leave our driver? So I would say, what part of those three items I just mentioned has anything to do with money, recognition, advancement, ego that motivates the driver? They don't. And this is why drivers typically aren't really great leaders. Now, they may, of course, produce short term results, growth, and all that is important, right? But it will only last as long as the driver continues to push and offer carrots until everyone realizes that it's not sustainable and it isn't working out. And pretty soon, this driver goes back to an individual contributor role, which is where they're naturally good and naturally successful. Now, if you look at this from the company's perspective, this is pretty much what you want, right? I mean, we want growth, we want revenue, we want profits, we want expansion, we want that, right? We want to push, push, push for all these things. But that pushing and driving comes at a price. And that price is usually employee turnover, employee churn, lost customers, or customers who feel like they're only important when they're spending money. It leads to an unbalanced culture, or what some might even call a toxic work culture. Now, none of this is inherently bad, since it all depends on your perspective and what you want in work and life. If you're a highly competitive person or someone who's personally driven to succeed, then that's great. That's awesome. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be a great leader of others. And that's okay. We just have to understand this. Where this gets uncomfortable is when companies think they need a hard driver in a leadership position without regard for the impact on the people who actually make these companies work. This is where true leadership really matters. Someone that connects with the team, that inspires them to greatness, a greatness that comes from inspiration, not external motivating factors or carrots. And this is where we see companies who are in such a hurry to build, grow, conquer, they never figure out or care about building a lasting team culture because they're only thinking about short-term gains. And this kind of thing happens all the time, and it's one reason why people get burned out. They get tired of being pushed to accomplish something purely for external motivators without any inspiration or internal motivators. And this has nothing to do with being goal-oriented or having strong goals for your teams. Goals are incredibly important for all of us, but it has to do with how you get there. So, kind of the final thing I want to say on this, if you simply look at where the word driver and leader come from, what do you see? Well, driving usually envisions pushing from behind, right? You're driving the herd, you're driving the group. The word leading usually envisions something or someone being out in front, running point, encouraging others to follow. Look, people and teams are not herd animals where someone is driving them to a destination. People want to be led. They want to feel a connection, an inspiration to what they're doing, and they want to feel it about the leader they choose to follow. They do not have to follow this person. So, in your role today, as a leader of your team, group, family, whatever, are you leading or are you driving? Are people following you because of the positive emotional connection and inspiration that you're providing them? Or are they only doing what you're pushing them to do? And as soon as you stop pushing, they stop. Look, there's always an element of pushing or driving in a leadership role, but this cannot be your main or primary tactic because it isn't sustainable in a team environment. Thanks for watching today. And as always, I hope you found something you can use in your life or in your job. So next time I'm going to be talking about the difference between what we think about things versus what they think, with they being everybody other than you. It's a very important topic as we all tend to think that others think the same way we do, but of course they don't. If you have any questions, want more information on anything that I'm talking about, you can always check out my website on the link below. You can send me a message and ask a question. I'll get back to you. So anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. Take care.